fungus. You're not just surviving, you're reaching for something. Even without stone, rituals didn't disappear, they just got dress codes and assigned seating. In Mesopotamia, the world's first cities weren't just marketplaces. They were ritual centers, beating with chants and scented with burning resin. Take Uruk, around 3000 BCE. There, towering ziggurats reached toward the heavens, built from sun-baked bricks in human awe. At the top, a shrine. Always a shrine. Priests would climb the steps, bearing offerings, whispering invocations, hoping the gods were in a listening mood that day. And these weren't casual affairs. Mesopotamian rituals had playbooks, incantations passed down on clay tablets, procedures involving sacrifices, oils, water purification, and even the color of the robes you wore. They took divinity seriously. One tablet describes a ceremony where the high priest would wash a statue's mouth, so the god could eat the offering placed before it. Spiritual dental hygiene, apparently. But the real showstopper? Extispicy. That's the art of reading the future through animal entrails. A priest would sacrifice a sheep, examine its liver, and declare whether it was a good day to build a wall or invade a neighbor. Some liver models even had engraved labels, like a roadmap for prophecy. Historians still argue whether this was true belief or just political theater. But hey, one misread spleen and your city's in ruins. Meanwhile, in Egypt, rituals weren't only about contacting gods, they were about keeping the universe running. Every sunrise, priests reenacted the rebirth of Ra, the sun god. They'd chant spells, ring sistrums, burn incense, and unveil sacred statues just as the sun crested the horizon. It wasn't just pageantry, it was cosmic maintenance, like renewing your divine subscription before it expires. Even the temple architecture whispered devotion. Narrow halls mimicked the journey from life to death to rebirth. At Karnak, certain rooms were so dark and sacred that only the high priest could enter, and even then, barefoot, purified, and probably a little nervous. One particularly quirky ritual, the opening of the mouth ceremony. Priests would touch a deceased person's lips with sacred tools, sometimes shaped like a fish, so the dead could eat, speak, and breathe in the afterlife. Imagine training for years in theology just to perform mouth CPR on a mummy. Rituals extended to daily life too. Ancient Egyptian homes had household altars, often with offerings of beer, bread, or tiny figurines. People weren't waiting until they died to get divine attention. They were lighting candles and whispering prayers in the kitchen. In India, early Vedic rituals were thunderous. Priests called Brahmins recited Sanskrit hymns with mathematical precision. These weren't casual chants. They followed specific intonations believed to activate spiritual energies. Some rituals required multiple fires, months of preparation, and animal sacrifices. But over time, the focus shifted from elaborate offerings to internal practices. This shift birthed Upanishadic philosophy, where fire rituals turned inward. Breath became sacred. Silence became an offering. Instead of chanting to the gods outside, seekers began to listen for the divine within. One Upanishad literally says, "You are that." Imagine hearing that whispered in a forest clearing at dawn. Goosebumps, right? In China, rituals were more reserved, but no less sacred. Ancestor worship formed the spine of spiritual life. Families offered food, burned incense, and recited prayers at home altars. They weren't just honoring the dead, they were maintaining an invisible social contract. Ancestors, if properly respected, could offer blessings and guidance. If ignored, well, things might mysteriously go missing. One of the most structured rituals in Chinese tradition was the Lai system, a collection of ceremonial rites that governed everything from funerals to feasts. Confucius praised it endlessly, believing that performing the correct ritual in the correct way could bring harmony to society and even balance to nature. That's a lot of pressure for dinner etiquette. Oh, and the Jade Emperor, basically the CEO of heaven. Offerings to him required incense timing, paper effigies, and a strong sense of formality. Burn the wrong item or show up late, and your divine performance review might not go well. Across the ocean, the Maya conducted rituals in jungle temples, where priests pierced their tongues or genitals to offer blood to the gods. Not exactly a soothing spa day, but to them, blood was currency, life essence exchanged for cosmic favor. Some ceremonies involve ball games, where the losing team might, well, let's just say it wasn't a trophy they got. Let's not forget the Aztecs, whose rituals could get intense. The Feast of Toxcatl included choosing a young man to live like a god for a year, fed, pampered, worshipped, and then sacrificed. Some historians suggest he volunteered. Others say he didn't get the fine print. Meanwhile, in Greece, ritual life was deeply woven into civic identity. Festivals like the Eleusinian Mysteries promised secret knowledge and mystical experience, if you kept your mouth shut afterward. We still don't know exactly what happened inside the halls of Demeter's temple, but participants emerged changed. Some claimed they no longer feared death. Even their theater was ritual. Plays performed during Dionysian festivals were more than entertainment. They were offerings, spiritual catharsis, mass therapy wrapped in robes and masks. Imagine attending a tragedy and leaving feeling spiritually exfoliated. Quirkiest tidbit of the night? In some Roman rituals, people wore animal masks and spoke in coded language to confuse evil spirits. One tablet describes participants wearing donkey skins and shouting nonsense syllables while waving sticks. Historians still argue whether it worked, or if the spirits just left out of secondhand embarrassment. Rituals gave shape to the unknowable. They turned chaos into choreography, mystery into method. And even if they sometimes involved entrails or donkey hats, they were rooted in something deep, a need to connect, to honor, to ask questions we still don't have answers for. Rituals weren't just grand ceremonies under temple arches. They were stitched into the rhythm of life, into planting seasons, childbirth, grief, and even Tuesdays, especially Tuesdays. Some cultures believed specific days carried different energies. And you thought Mercury in retrograde was a recent panic. In the Indus Valley, daily spiritual practice wasn't about theatrical altars. It was about order. Streets were laid out like cosmic blueprints, with drainage systems flowing like veins. Archaeologists found small carved seals with strange symbols. Some think they were used for trade. Others whisper of spiritual markings, sigils to invite protection or prosperity. One famous seal shows a horned figure sitting cross-legged, surrounded by animals. Could be an early depiction of Shiva, or just a really chill goat dad. Historians still debate. Across the steppe, the Scythians brought rituals on horseback. These were no mere brutes. They buried their dead with gold, embroidered clothes, and sometimes their favorite horses. One burial site revealed a warrior whose body was tattooed in swirling mythic shapes, and beside him, a small stash of cannabis. Yep, apparently ritual hotboxing was a thing. Herodotus even wrote about it. Tents filled with smoke, warriors howling in ecstasy, spiritual enlightenment, or ancient music festivals. In early Japan, Shinto rituals revolved around kami, spirits that lived in trees, rivers, wind. These weren't remote gods, they were neighbors. Every shrine was a handshake between the natural and spiritual world. A spring meant for purification, a torii gate marking the shift from ordinary to sacred. And every ritual act, whether offering a rice ball or ringing a bell, was a conversation, sometimes whispered, sometimes sung. One standout practice? The Shikinen Sengu, where a shrine is rebuilt every 20 years. Not renovated, rebuilt. From scratch. Same design, same dimensions. A ritual of renewal that's been ongoing for over a millennium. It's less about the wood and more about the memory. The process, a spiritual muscle, flexed with purpose. In Celtic lands, ritual was full of layers. Nature, seasons, moon phases. Their druids were part philosopher, part priest, part woodland DJ. They performed rites under oak trees, using mistletoe harvested with golden sickles. Talk about bougie botanicals. One surviving tale involves a ritual bath, a warrior bathing in bull's blood to gain invincibility. That's one spa treatment you won't find on Groupon. Even the calendar was a ritual. The Wheel of the Year, with its 8 sacred festivals, marked solstices, harvests, and transitions. Samhain, for instance, what we now call Halloween, wasn't about candy. It was when the veil between worlds thinned and spirits walked among us. People left offerings, lit bonfires, and wore disguises to fool wandering ghosts. Sound familiar? Yep, your costume party has ancient roots. Zoom back to Africa, and you'll find rituals woven into every aspect of community. In Yoruba tradition, rituals honored the Orisha, spiritual entities representing forces of nature and human behavior. Drumming wasn't just music, it was an invocation. Movement wasn't just dance, it was communication. Possession, far from fearsome, was a form of spiritual closeness. Imagine channeling divine wisdom while keeping perfect rhythm. Beyoncé wishes. In Ethiopia, ancient Christian rituals blend seamlessly with older traditions. Monasteries carved into cliffs host midnight liturgies, illuminated by flickering oil lamps. The air smells of frankincense. The chants echo like waves in a stone sea. And sometimes, to honor saints, devotees walk for days barefoot, sleeping under trees, driven by nothing but devotion and dusty resolve. In the Arctic, the Inuit had rituals tied to survival. A successful whale hunt required not just tools, but songs, stories, and gestures passed down for generations. Everything had spirit, ice, breath, shadow. Shamans, called Ngakuk, mediated between human and non-human realms, guided by dreams and auroras. Some rituals involved entering trances, their bodies still while their spirits wandered. Where, they rarely said, but when they returned, they brought knowledge, healing, and sometimes a warning. And down in Oceania, Pacific Islanders held ceremonies with hypnotic rhythm, clapping, chanting, paddling in unison. Their rituals honored sea gods, ancestors, volcanoes. One Hawaiian ritual involved offering a lock of hair to the volcano goddess Pele to ensure safe travels. Other islands practiced tattooing not just as art but as rite of passage. Each line, each dot, a spiritual journey inked in permanence. A quirky note from ancient Rome: some rituals involve bearing wax dolls to cast spells. Think Barbie, but make it witchy. Others left little curse tablets at temples, inscribed with messages like, "May Marcus trip on his own ego and fall into a puddle of shame." Okay, maybe not those exact words, but you get the vibe. One common thread, whether whispered in moonlight, chanted in temples, or danced around fires, these rituals help people make sense of the unseen. They bridged the gap between fear and hope, between silence and song. They gave grief a process, gave joy a place to land. Even now you can feel the echo, in birthday candles, in wedding vows, in that strange urge to touch wood or toss salt, modern minds, ancient rhythms. And as we drift through these stories, it becomes clear. Rituals aren't just about pleasing deities. They're about remembering who we are and who we're trying to become. Of course, not all rituals were serene whispers and flickering candles. Some were designed to shake the sky, to shout into the abyss, just in case something was listening. The ancients weren't always subtle, and sometimes neither were their gods. Take the ancient Mesopotamians, for example. We've already talked about them peering into goat livers and deciphering destiny from a spleen squiggle, but their rituals extended far beyond temple steps. During times of celestial dread, like a lunar eclipse, they'd perform a bizarre swap, a substitute king ritual. The real king would step down temporarily, and a proxy, sometimes a gardener or prisoner, would be crowned in his place. He'd enjoy royal food, clothes, even a fake court. Then, after the danger passed, well, his services were no longer needed. Historians still argue whether this was a sincere cosmic negotiation or just elite-level scapegoating. In ancient Mesoamerica, blood was a big deal. The Maya and Aztecs didn't just spill it, they saw it as a sacred currency. The gods had given blood to form humans, so giving some back was only polite. Maya kings would pierce their tongues and genitals with stingray spines. Yes, you heard that right. To communicate with ancestors. Hallucinogenic rituals often followed. Picture incense smoke swirling, drums pounding, and jaguar masks dancing under a full moon. It wasn't a rave, it was spiritual diplomacy. Over in ancient Greece, things took a turn toward the theatrical. Ever heard of the Eleusinian Mysteries? These were secret rituals held in honor of Demeter and Persephone, goddesses of agriculture and rebirth. Thousands made the pilgrimage each year. Initiates fasted, purified, and gathered in torchlit processions. And at the climax, well, we don't know. The details were never written down. Breaking the vow of silence could mean death. Whatever happened in that dark hall, participants claimed to leave transformed, no longer afraid of death. Now that's one heck of a group retreat. Then there's the Zoroastrians, early Persians who believed in a cosmic battle between light and darkness. Their rituals were all about purity. Water, fire, and earth were sacred. So sacred, in fact, that bodies weren't buried or burned. Doing so would pollute the elements. Instead, the dead were placed atop towers of silence, circular stone structures where vultures picked the bones clean. Harsh? Maybe. But in their view, it was the most eco-friendly afterlife plan available. In ancient China, the mandate of heaven wasn't just a concept. It was ritually reaffirmed. Emperors performed elaborate sacrifices to heaven at the Temple of Heaven in Beijing. Picture wide marble altars under a blue sky, incense coiling upward, and an emperor seen as the son of heaven, making offerings for the good of the realm. If crops failed or earthquakes struck, it was a sign. The mandate had been lost. Imagine if modern elections worked like that. Sorry, Bob, your approval rating plummeted after that thunderstorm. The spirits want Susan now. Meanwhile, in sub-Saharan Africa, many rituals centered around ancestral veneration. Spirits of the departed weren't gone. They just moved upstairs. Offerings of kola nuts, palm wine, and spoken prayers kept the relationship warm. And if things went wrong, a sickness, a drought, diviners were consulted. These were spiritual detectives, interpreting cowrie shells, animal bones, or even spider webs for answers. Some traditions believe spiders can carry messages between worlds. Beats email. Let's swing back to the Pacific, where rituals met rhythm. On the island of Bali, ceremonies like the Ngaben, a royal cremation, are theatrical events. Think towering bamboo structures, flower garlands, gamelan music, and a processional that feels half parade, half spiritual launchpad. The idea? Send the soul off in style, untethering it from worldly ties. One traveler described it as a joyful funeral, a phrase that shouldn't work, but somehow does. In early Slavic traditions, spring was welcomed with fire and feast. During Maslenitsa, effigies of winter were burned while people danced, ate pancakes, and symbolically banished cold. It's like Groundhog Day, but with better snacks and slightly more arson. Even in ancient Judaism, ritual wasn't always private. The Yom Kippur scapegoat ritual involved transferring communal sins onto a goat, which was then cast into the wilderness. A literal go walk it off moment. Symbolism aside, it's a powerful metaphor for release, atonement, and the idea that sometimes we need a clean slate and a very confused goat. And then there's the strange, shimmering rituals that bridge dreams and waking life. In some Aboriginal Australian traditions, the dream time isn't past, it's always happening. Ritual dances and songs don't reenact myths, they sustain reality. The land exists because the stories do. And when those stories are sung, the world remembers itself. That's not just ritual, that's metaphysical maintenance. Across all these traditions, despite the sharp obsidian knives, the golden crowns, the whispered names, one thing holds true. Rituals were designed to realign us with nature, with each other, with the unseen. Whether it was a sunrise chant, a blood-soaked offering, or a silent moment beneath a banyan tree, each ritual carves space for the sacred, for awe, for the ache of meaning in a chaotic world. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. To pause, to honor, to reach. By now, you've probably noticed that ancient rituals weren't just about pleasing the gods. They were also about shaping us, our minds, our hearts, our relationships. They offered structure in chaos, meaning in mystery, and sometimes just a reason to gather and sing. But there's another layer to all this, one that gets overlooked: how rituals shaped memory and how memory shaped identity. Let's begin with the indigenous tribes of the Pacific Northwest, where entire histories were encoded into songs and dances. These weren't performances for entertainment. They were living archives, a chief's lineage, a village's origin, even boundaries of land ownership, all recorded in the beat of drums and the turn of the foot. Some ceremonies, like the potlatch, involved giving away wealth to affirm power. Imagine showing status not by hoarding, but by generosity. Historians still debate whether these rituals were forms of economic redistribution or symbolic declarations of hierarchy. Probably both. In the Andes, the Inca Empire stretched like a golden serpent across the mountains, and rituals were woven into everything from war to weaving. Every festival was tied to the sun's position, every chant timed to the shadows of stone temples. One remarkable ritual, the Capacocha, involved child sacrifices on mountaintops. Chosen children, prepared with reverence, given coca leaves to ease their passage, then left with treasures high above the clouds. Chilling? Yes, but also profound in its logic. These children were messengers to the gods, bridging mortal sorrow with divine favor. Now zoom over to India again, where the Agnihotra ritual still burns at dawn and dusk. This isn't some ancient relic, it's practiced today. 2 spoonfuls of ghee, 2 mantras, 1 fire. That's it. The ritual is said to purify the atmosphere, heal the land, and realign subtle energies. Scientists may scoff, but farmers across rural India insist their crops grow better. Who needs Wi-Fi when you've got clarified butter and Vedic precision? And let's talk about sound. In Tibet, the resonant hum of a singing bowl isn't just for spot playlists. It's believed to tune the body to natural frequencies. Monks use overtone chanting, layering multiple vocal tones at once, to vibrate not just through their chest but through the very air around them. Some visitors claim to feel their bones ringing. One tourist described it as being sung to by the Himalayas. That's some next-level surround sound. In West Africa, the Dagara people believe that every person is born into a specific elemental identity: water, fire, earth, mineral, or nature. Rituals aren't one-size-fits-all. They're tailored to your elemental self. If you're of mineral, you might be a natural communicator or storyteller. Your rituals involve digging, carving, or speaking. Forget birth charts. This is personality profiling with incense and drums. And then there's the rites of passage, Perhaps the most universal of all ritual forms. Puberty, marriage, death, moments where identity shifts and the old self is left behind. The Maasai lion hunt, once a rite for boys to become warriors, has mostly faded, but modern alternatives still mark that leap. In Jewish tradition, the bar or bat mitzvah invites a child into responsibility with blessings and song. In Korea, the Hwangap celebrates the 60th birthday as a return to rebirth. You survive 6 decades, you get to start over. Deal. In the Pacific Islands, tattoos themselves were rituals. The Samoan tattoo wasn't just ink, it was initiation. The process could take weeks, with sharpened bone tools and volcanic ash, and every line told a story of lineage, bravery, and belonging. It hurt, a lot, but pain wasn't a bug, it was the feature. A visible reminder that identity is earned, not assumed. Let's not forget the rituals of silence. In ancient Christian monastic life, silence wasn't absence, it was presence. Monks communicated with gestures, nods, and long, unspoken knowing. In some Buddhist practices, a 10-day silent retreat, no speaking, no reading, no eye contact, isn't punishment, it's purification. You go in with noise and come out with, well, maybe just more questions, but quieter ones. Even daily habits carried ritual weight. In Shinto, the act of washing your hands and mouth before entering a shrine, called tamizu, wasn't just hygiene. It was a moment of mental reset, a way to mark that you were stepping into sacred space. 1 bowl of water, 2 scoops, a breath, a pause. In ancient Rome, the lares and penates, household spirits, were honored with offerings at small altars inside the home. Bread, fruit, wine. The idea was simple. The home is alive. It listens. It deserves respect. Picture lighting a candle not for Instagram vibes, but to say, thanks house for not collapsing on me today. And finally, in modern Japan, the Obon Festival welcomes ancestors home for a brief visit. Lanterns are lit, songs are sung, and at the end, paper boats are floated down rivers to guide the spirits back. It's a blend of joy and sorrow, of presence and parting. And it reminds us, the line between past and present isn't a wall, it's a window. So what do all these rituals have in common? Not the gods, not the offerings, but the intentional pause. The idea that life deserves punctuation, that time can be bent and shaped into sacred space. Because even now, in our click-click-scroll world, we crave that pause. A breath before a wedding vow, a candle on a birthday cake, a moment of silence after loss. Rituals don't have to be ancient. They just have to be alive. Let's let it all settle now. The incense has thinned. The drums have faded. The temple doors creaked shut long ago. You've followed the flicker of flame through stone chambers and open skies, watched ancient hands pour water, draw symbols, bow low. Let the echo of those sacred rhythms grow quieter now, like ripples smoothing out on still water. Maybe you still feel the pulse of a chant somewhere in your chest, or see the glow of a lantern bobbing on a midnight river. Let those linger, but gently. No need to hold them tight. They've done their work. Take a deeper breath now, slower. Let your jaw unclench, your shoulders melt toward the earth. If you close your eyes, maybe you'll picture a mountaintop temple under a full moon, or a quiet fire being tended in the corner of a simple clay home. Soft flickers, slow air. You've carried these stories across time, and they've carried you too, across oceans and deserts and snowy mountain paths. But the journey is over for now. The rituals can rest, the questions can wait. Even the ancients knew when to stop speaking. Let this final moment be like the silence after a bell fades. Still, whole, enough. Feel the weight of the blanket, the hush of the room. You are safe. You are part of something old and wise and vast, just like they were. Let sleep come now, not with a bang, but like smoke curling from a sacred flame. No more striving, no more steps, just stillness. Tomorrow the world will wait for you, but for now, rest. You've journeyed far, now sleep.